Yeah, we're live now. So, hi everyone. So I'm really excited to be talking with Rachael Wolff today. We've both got really recent releases, new books out this year, and we're going to be discussing interpretation, perspective, and possibility, which are three really great topics. And like we were just chatting before this about how broad it is, and like we can just sort of engage in it in like so many different ways. So yeah, we'll be discussing how we interpret the world through our own beliefs and how this can be seen in our written pieces, how our perspective can both hold us a prisoner and set us free, and how being aware of these things can help in the current pandemic with everything that sort of we're facing on a global situation at the moment. So yeah, just to note, if you're watching this live, you can use the live chat facility to ask Rachael and I any questions at any point in this discussion. So it's a really good opportunity to engage with us. And if you've got any specific questions relating to something that we've just said, then we should be able to like answer your questions on the spot. So firstly, Rachael, shall we start with introductions, sort of introducing ourselves and our books for viewers who aren't familiar with us?
Sounds good. Yeah. I'm Rachael Wolff. My new book is Letters from a Better Me. Letters from a Better Me, How Becoming an Empowered Woman Transforms the World. I am a speaker, a blogger, author, and transformational coach. My degree's in human development, and I minored in anthropology, where I studied cultural anthropology. So I am fascinated by understanding people. And so after I graduated college because I went back to college as a single mom, and I was, I think, 35 when I went back to school. And I really started looking at perspective. And so after I graduated, I could not stop writing. I was like, I have to find a way to write. And so I started a blog called From a Loving Place. And that was based on a lot of my readings in college were from Holocaust survivors like Elie Wiesel and Viktor Frankl. And then, Martin Luther King was a big, inspiration to me. And so all these leaders, they led from a loving place. So I wanted to get better at interpreting the world from that lens. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's practice, and which is what came from that. And because of writing those, that's where Letters from a Better Me came from.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. So tell us about you. I want to know more about you.
Okay, so my name is Madeline Dyer, and I am a YA fiction writer. And I am sort of like moving into memoir territory now. So my first memoir released in January. It's called Captive, and here it is. There we go. I found the camera straight away that time. I've been so far, I've been sort of like going like that, trying to find the camera. But yeah, so Captive is a memoir in poetry, and it's based on the therapy poems I wrote in 2018 and the beginning of 2019 when I was suffering from some really strange symptoms. So like basically, one day I woke up and I was hallucinating, I couldn't balance, I was falling over, and I became absolutely terrified of everything. And doctors didn't know what was wrong. So they diagnosed me with OCD and anxiety. And but then I started to develop psychosis as well. So then like they put me under a psychiatric team, and I was like given antipsychotics. But the more this went on, the like more ill I was getting, and no one really knew what was happening to me. So I then lost the ability to communicate verbally. And that was just like a really dark and scary time. And it was during that time that I turned to writing poetry, because like it really helped me process everything that I was feeling and sort of like understand what was happening to me, because like I couldn't sort of like talk to like my friends and family about it, because like I just lost that ability. And yeah, I felt like I was possessed, and it was just like I felt so strange all the time, and it was really terrifying. But 6 months into all of this, since the symptoms started, doctors realised I actually had brain inflammation, and that was the cause of my symptoms. It's a chronic condition. I still have it now, but it's managed now. Well, I've actually just started treatment again for it, because I started treatment again on Tuesday. So yeah, so I'm now living with like this chronic condition, and I then found like that I've got this like collection of therapy poems that I'd written, and these poems expressed my frustration and fear during the time when I didn't know what was going on, and when sort of like I felt doctors weren't taking me seriously because they were only focusing on my psychiatric symptoms, not the neurological. Like they were saying that when I lost my ability to speak and like to communicate, it was just that I was too anxious to talk, when in actual fact, like I physically could not manage to talk. So yeah, it was afterwards when I was in sort of the second round of treatment, I think, at that time, and I came across all my therapy poems, and I showed them to a friend, and she was like, she said it really helped her understand like what I'd been feeling. So yeah, that's what made me sort of like decide to turn it into a poetry collection, and it is like a memoir and poetry too, because it chronicles like the illness from my point of view, sort of like really like deep and personal. And yeah, it's I decided to release it just to sort of like raise awareness for this condition, as well as for like mental illnesses as well, because like the OCD and psychosis I experienced was really terrifying, and I found that there was a lot of like misinformation out there about what those two things are. So yeah, I published Captive in order to raise awareness for autoimmune encephalitis and other neuropsychiatric illnesses. So yeah, both our books are really personal, like in so many ways. And obviously we see everything through our own lens, and this is always individual to us. And like I'm really fascinated by the concepts of like objectivity and subjectivity, especially when it comes to like your own writing. And I'm very much aware that like true objectivity can be really difficult, like if not impossible at times to achieve when we're sort of like evaluating our own experiences in our writing. And this is something that I was really aware of in writing my poetry collection, because it's so like immersive to my own feelings, and it's very sort of personal to me. But also because like I was experiencing like psychosis and hallucinations, like I would be seeing things happening around me that weren't actually happening in reality. So that's something that I've been like really interested in now, because like the beliefs that I had at the time, like the delusions that I was having because of this brain information, like I was convinced all of this was real, and it sort of means that I'm very much more sort of like analytical in my writing now, and I'm very much sort of like trying to work out what is a belief and what is like actually happening. So yeah, how would you say that your own beliefs can be seen in your writing?
Well, one of the things I realize, and the ways I interpret, like how I help myself, has always been well, I shouldn't say always. I learned how to use this technique is when I am feeling trapped, to look at other ways to look at it. And for me, that meant writing it down. So if I didn't want to feel something, I had to look at it from different points of view. Not saying that was going to change it, but just saying I wasn't trapped in that belief system. And so in letters, I take the whole journey that I kind of went through. Of first, I really had to become aware of the beliefs that were holding me back. I had to become aware of them. I had to see them, because if we can't see them, we can't heal and grow, because that record plays in our head over and over and over again, saying we can't, saying this won't happen, saying this, just all those things that shut us down. So, because what I realized is however I perceive the world, I project out and I get back. So however I want to look at it, it's going to happen that way. So if I want to look at it from a negative perspective, it's going to come back that way to me and show me lessons in life that way. And those are the ones that hit me with the, emotional 2x4s against the head to learn the lesson. And I was stubborn. It took me a long time to learn that some of the patterns that were keeping me stuck were my own. They didn't have to do with the people I was with. They had to do with me and what I was projecting out. So that's all through the book. But where I start is in those dark beliefs, in those beliefs that kept me prisoner, and that I see out in social media. I see when, people talk about media trolls, and I'll look through all the comments, and the researcher part of me is like, why are they saying this? Why do they do this? And I realize that it's really the perspective of the way we look at the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, and they're all going to be different. And so how I got better was to see that my beliefs are just perspectives of truth. They're my perspectives of truth. They're individual to me. So nobody's going to look at them in the same way exactly the same way as I do, and then project that. So when other people talk to me, I have to look at it through, okay, they're looking through their lens.
Yeah.
And this whole book goes that way. So it helps us see our own lens, and then it helps us see other people's lenses to go, okay, maybe I understand this a little bit better. My history is, I went through a lot of childhood traumas, and I was, suicidal. I was a suicidal teen, hospitalized at 17 for an attempt at suicide. So my journey started really young in trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, seeing those patterns and how they projected this reality into toxic relationships and all of that. And when I changed my belief patterns, everything changed. I mean, but writing the letters, because the seed that kept popping back up over and over and over again was to that we write our own story, and that's, it sat with me, and I have been writing letters since I was 8 years old when my best friend moved away from me. So it just was that natural path to how to get better, was writing those letters. And then as I studied it in psychology and all that, seeing that it was actually a therapeutic process.
Yeah.
And, with poetry, which is so fascinating to me about you, and that's why I want to hear your interpretation of this, is because that's what got me through my teenage years. Was that's the only place I felt like I was being honest with who I was, because I couldn't explain what I was going through to people.
Right.
I couldn't. Everybody saw my smile. Everybody saw how happy I was. They did not see what was going on inside. And I used poetry to really see myself. So tell me how that worked for you.
I definitely found, like you were saying, that it is a place where I was like most honest with like how I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And like I thought about this quite like analytically recently, because I am writing a second memoir, which is like more traditional narrative, like looking at my whole illness, because like my therapy writings, they give like a very sort of like narrow view in a way, and I want to sort of like write more about like the wider sort of like impact of it all, and like with more medical context, and also explore like gender politics within like the medical field, because like I've sort of like had a lot of experience with doctors not believing me because I was female, and like assuming therefore that there wasn't a physical thing going on. But yeah, when I was sort of like doing sort of this research for this second memoir, I did specifically look at poetry as a therapy, like writing poetry as it is very therapeutic and cathartic. And I was really interested in the reasons why. And I came to a conclusion that when I was writing these poems, and I was like writing about my psychosis and all the hallucinations and like this great utter fear that I felt, it felt like my poetry was a really safe space because it was only meant for me. And I didn't have like this fear of being judged, and I was able to like write about everything without this worry about how it would be received. Because like I know when like I got diagnosed like with the psychosis part of the brain inflammation, and like I was so reluctant to tell anyone, because like in the media you see psychosis sort of like used, like especially in like films, like a villain is typically made more evil by giving him episodes of psychosis.
Mhm.
So I felt like when doctors like told me, oh, you're having like episodes of psychosis caused by this brain inflammation, I felt really ashamed and I just didn't want to tell anyone. But I had to sort of like process like these feelings of shame, and I still couldn't like talk to people like much at that stage because like I was still just regaining the ability to speak and to be able to like those cognitive processes to allow me to communicate verbally. So like the writing was like the only thing that I had in that respect. But it was kind of like almost I was using poetry as a conversation between my old self and my new self, like trying to sort of like work out this new balance for like who I was. And yeah, it was really reassuring just to like write out everything. But also because I was like choosing quite a creative form in poetry, because like I normally write YA novels, and well, I did try to continue my novel writing for all this, but like I just couldn't do it because I wasn't well enough. Like I'd lost a lot of that ability. And being able to sort of like tune into poetry as a form, which I'd never really done before, it allowed me to sort of like think of myself as that I was still a creative person, and I was able to hold on to my identity as like a creative person. So that helped me feel that like I hadn't changed like drastically and that I was no longer like unrecognizable. But yeah, like the writing and poetry was just so like therapeutic and really helped me process everything. And it was a really safe environment to do it in as well, because like I know I did later publish this collection and like release it to the world, but that was like my decision at a much later date. So when I was writing it, I felt like safe that I could like explore anything that I wanted to or needed to without like repercussions of like what other people would think or their reactions. Because I know that is something that I do worry about a lot when I'm writing. Like in my fiction, I do worry about like how it will be received. Because like therapy writing is so personal, I had to find a way to not worry about that, because otherwise I wouldn't be being honest in my therapy writing. I mean, it wouldn't have like the usefulness for me. So yeah, I had to sort of like make sure that like what I was writing was doing sort of like its purpose. But at the same time, when I began like the therapy writing, I didn't actually realize that I was going to rely on it so much to understand like my new self, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, like I have been sort of like very much like fascinated about why I sort of like changed from fiction to poetry for that. And like now, because like I've gone back to fiction writing now, and I have tried like some poetry writing, but I haven't quite got like the same connection to it at the moment. So I do wonder whether it was just like I sort of like needed that release for like my feelings and creativity at that point when I was like having all this brain inflammation and psychosis and OCD. And now that I'm like a bit better, I don't quite have that same connection. So I do wonder like if I get another flare up of this, because like it is a chronic condition and like typically you'll get like flare ups every like 3 to 5 years, whether I will then sort of like dive straight back into poetry like then. And it's really interesting for me to see like how I'm using it, but also in a way how it is using me. So
Yeah. I actually love that thought there, because it's true. I mean, I have started books to start writing books, but it's in the time, and if I'm feeling it, I have to feel through it, and
yeah.
and I know when it's time to stop. Like I was in the middle of writing a different book when Letters from a Better Me came about.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Letters from a Better Me, but it was a more broad, it wasn't to women, it wasn't empowerment of women. But then all the Harvey Weinstein stuff came out when Hollywood was, really taking on the abuses that were going on in Hollywood, and so you started seeing it everywhere throughout the world. And I noticed the need for this writing in this direction, because at first I was like, no, I'm not going to write a women's empowerment book. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Because, I write this blog called From a Loving Place, and there was not a lot of love going on right then. So I was like, I don't know if I can do that. But then when I saw that vision, and, you were talking about that with your writing, it's like when you see that vision, and it flows through you. And if it wasn't right, it wouldn't. So it's like, I truly believe that like when we're supposed to write different ways, it will just come out. And when we fight it, it doesn't come out right. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed that in your writing, is when I try to force myself to do something, if it doesn't feel authentic, I just have such resistance to it. And the people who read it tend to have resistance to it too, I've noticed. So it's interesting how that works.
Exactly, because like when we're writing, we're putting so much of like ourselves into it and like so much emotion. So like whatever we're feeling when we're writing it, like a reader reading it is likely to also feel it. So yeah, like I definitely agree that like we've got to sort of like write exactly the way we need to write and not feel sort of like pressured to do like it in a specific way, because that's just not going to be helpful at all. And like on sort of like a slightly different note, but I've noticed when I'm writing like my YA fiction, the times when I get like writer's block and I feel so stuck, it's usually because I have like gone in a way that isn't sort of like meant to be for that manuscript or for those characters. And like I know now that if I get writer's block, it's telling me that I'm not writing it the way I should be writing it or the way I need to be writing it. And I think sort of like just stepping back, like if you get stuck with like whatever you're writing and just thinking about why you might be stuck, or just thinking about like your overall vision and what you'd intended to write. Like for me, it often shows that I've got stuck because I'm veering away from this vision, or perhaps like I'm now trying to like conform to like expectations that I think people have about what I'm writing. And yeah, it just doesn't work. Like I need to be like really true to myself, because otherwise it's not like hugely important for me to write. And like whatever I write, I put so much of myself in it. So I need to write in a way that feels really satisfying for me.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that's the whole thing about our interpretation and perspectives of the world. If we're going against against what our our energies for, it just doesn't come out right. And that's when I've noticed I take other people's stuff personally, because I've grown. My mom used to say to me all the time, "It's not your business what other people think of you." And so that was one of those things that has really developed over time for me to like, when I look at people talking, I don't see them talking to me. I see them talking to themselves, which really helps when I'm interpreting people's negative or positive judgment. They're seeing it through their lens of reality. And when I'm not committed to what I wrote, if it doesn't feel like it's me, I notice I take it more personally, because it's like, oh, I was trying to be this for you. Do you know what I mean? It just,
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So it's funny how I've, and as I've gotten older and it's become more and more clear how people's lives are completely their own beliefs projected out and coming back, that I really need to be true to me. I really need to be authentic, like speak in my authentic voice. So I have learned to say no a lot more and firmly, with a very good boundary of no, because if I don't, it's not me. And then I don't feel confident in representing that voice. So
yeah, that definitely makes sense. And like I think it's all sort of like bound up in confidence as well. And like I don't know whether you'd like be able to get to like this stage until you've got like a certain amount of experience, and to like know that like if you don't like stand up like what you want to do, or like what you want to be like saying, like if you know the other side about how you'll feel if you don't, like I find that is like hugely motivating for me, because like I might be worried about like saying no to something, or saying like this is what I want to do, but I know from past experience when I've gone along with what other people want, but it just doesn't feel right to me, and I can like use that feeling of it not feeling right to try and make sure that it does feel right next time. So
absolutely.
Yeah, like I know that I'm a lot more confident now, so like I can sort of use that confidence, like, and feel sort of like I've got more sort of like more of a right to say exactly what I want to say and not be worried about what others are thinking. So yeah, I can definitely see how like my sort of perspective like on things has changed because of that and because of like different experiences. And like, I also find like perspective and being aware of like individual subjectivity when writing about my own experiences is something that I'm just really interested in. Like particularly with memory, because I've lost like huge parts of my memory due to this brain inflammation. So I find it really fascinating, sort of like looking at my own perspective about how like I've got these huge gaps, so I can't be objective in that way. And I used to think of it as like, oh well, if I can't remember, I can't be confident about like anything. But now I'm like, I'm trying to change my perspective on that. And like, yeah, I have like these gaps in my memory, but I can still be confident about like what I want to do, what I want to know, like how I want to be now. Because yeah, before it just sort of like I didn't feel confident at all because I felt like I didn't know myself. But now I feel a lot more sort of like I know myself better, and that has happened like through my writing process really, and through writing about everything I'm understanding it more. So yeah, like it's really fascinating, and writing as well I found has it's like me claiming my own experiences and saying, yeah, this happened to me and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm like embracing it now, and it is really empowering.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so important. What you just said is embracing it, embracing our whole self, embracing all of us, because sometimes it's like we are a part of everything that's inside of us. So if we have a thought or belief system that's not helping us to recognize it and go, okay, this is where I am, I have to take in, this is where I am, but then understand that it doesn't have to stay that way.
Yeah.
But embracing the fact that I can be here right now. I'm okay. I'm surviving. But just knowing is such a big, that awareness of learning and seeing it is so key to doing anything with it. Because if you don't see it, you can't do anything with it. You're trapped in that prison of it because you're not going to, so many people are so scared to look at it. So they'll use numbing tactics. They'll go to different things to try to numb themselves so they don't have to feel it, so they don't have to see it. And that just keeps you there. Yeah. Whereas when you're ready to face it and look at it, like you said, it becomes empowerment. And that's actually the whole point of my book is taking that whole process and looking at it and turning it into empowerment, all from within. Because I know a lot of people, what I've run up against is people like cringe at a better me. Like some people will be like, oh, okay. And it's because they're attached to that belief system that a better me is outside of us. It's that I'm going to go to a gym to become a better me. I'm going to do this I'm going to go lose all this weight to become a better me. I'm going to do all these things to become a better me, but they're all outside things. They're not that inside. Let's look at myself and then see how to change things. Because when we're not happy with ourselves, so we're doing things because we're not happy with ourselves, like the weight loss systems don't work. Anything that you try doesn't work. It doesn't stick because you still haven't looked at that inside part of you. So what you said is like so key, and I love it because it's like it's everything that I try to do in my writing is show people that, and just it's all the inward. It's embracing the inward, and then whatever you're doing outward becomes so much better because you're not fighting against the energy. If you don't like yourself and you're trying to lose weight, losing the weight isn't going to make you like yourself anymore.
Yeah, because that's just like treating the symptoms but not the cause. Like that like links like exactly to how doctors were treating my brain inflammation at first, is they were like treating the symptoms and saying, oh well, because you've got OCD and psychosis and hallucinations, it's like purely psychiatric. We didn't like think to look for the cause. But yeah, like looking at sort of like your own thought processes about it, and like understanding yourself is just so important. And like I know your book is all about like turning chaos into positivity and, well, particularly empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking like in the current climate with this pandemic, like this could be really helpful. So like obviously when you were writing this book, you didn't know it would be a pandemic, like unless you're psychic, which I don't know, you might be. But,
I don't think I am, but I did definitely feel the energy like of this is not coming through just me, but no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so yeah, like now that your book is launching, and obviously we're in like this current climate with like the pandemic, what are your thoughts surrounding all this, and like the sort of like thought processes behind your book and that motivated you? Like how would you say that people could apply that to like fears about the pandemic?
Well, it's funny because the book's journey actually gives you the tools to handle this pandemic. It gives you what I'm seeing, and obviously we see the increase in domestic violence, we see the increase in suicidal, we see the increase in a lot of the mental health issues being more intensified, because when we're looking at it through we're looking at our reality through that lens, through that perspective that keeps us in that prisoner role. So the book, it gives you the letter, and then it gives you the kind of why behind the letter, and then it gives you exercises and tools to use.
Right.
Not just writing letters, but doing other things to really dig down and see why your perspective is where it is. Look at why it's there. And the funniest thing is I have a exercise in there about centering yourself around daily activities. So because right now it's really important to stay grounded, because we can get caught up in all the stuff going around us, whether it's the pandemic, the violence, the negativity. It's so easy. So many people's nerves are on edge. I mean, so they're looking for a place to act out. And that grounding process is so important. So I have an exercise in the book about grounding ourselves in our daily activities. I mean, just fully being present. And even one of the examples I give is washing your hands. So I've actually used and I had to really look at how I was doing that. And so I would really take the time and wash my hands and do a full breath in and a full breath out for that 20 seconds, and take in everything I was feeling, take in the sense of the water, take in the smell of the soap, everything. And it really helped keep me grounded from second to second, and because like you, our books just came out. So this was supposed to be our big promotion and doing all this stuff. And so it took us in a very different direction. And I also had to process the grief of losing the book tour. I had to process the grief of, and seeing what it was and doing the activities that are in the book. Because I have, about staying present, awareness, getting out in nature. It's all there because it's the tools that have always centered me and kept me in a place so that I could look at other options of ways to think. These are all the tools I do use to do that. So what I found is that, which I'm a huge believer in audiobooks for these kind of books, because having an outside voice coming in as you're reading has always helped me. I have hundreds of audiobooks because when I'm in a perspective that I don't want to be in, I need to hear other people's perspectives to get me out of those. So I actually used that part of my book to get me back, to remember where I want to be. Where do I want to be living from? And I knew I didn't want to live from the fear that is so easy to go to with this pandemic. It's absolutely one of the easiest things, because all you have to do is turn on the TV.
Yeah,
So
like it's everywhere.
yeah, so the book gives you those tools to operate from a place of what you want to represent instead of what you're against or what you fear. So it's about looking at one of the things I love about Martin Luther King. He always had his eye on the future he wanted to see. He wasn't stuck in the things he didn't want to see more of. So it kept his messages so incredibly clear because he represented what he stood for. And so with this, you hear a lot of people representing, you can hear more about what people are against than what they're actually standing for. What's the future we want to see? How do we get to the future we want to see? What are the solutions? Let's not focus on the blame and the problems and all that, because that just keeps you in that prison. It doesn't help you. So the journey of the book actually gets you to a place that can get you out of those fear places and get you out of sitting in the grief of all the losses that we're feeling. And it's not saying don't feel those things, because I feel like it's so important to, like you said, honor what you're feeling, like get it out. Because if we don't get it out, it comes out in different ways to other people. And what I realized is, how we see ourselves in this, how we see ourselves right now is so important. So if we're looking at ourselves in the mirror and we just are judging ourselves like crazy, everything we do projects that and we get that back. So I wanted to take people on that journey of seeing that and seeing, and right now in this pandemic, you can really get lost if you're self-abusing. I call it self-abusing, because if you look at the definition of emotional, verbal and mental abuse, a lot of times you can look at what you do in the mirror and go, oh crap. I'm doing that. And so for me, don't want to project that out so that it comes back to me. I've been there, done that, over it. I don't want to get back there. So it's really essential that I have to be accountable and responsible for whatever energy I'm putting out into the world. So, and that starts with me. That starts with how I look at me. And then whatever I'm projecting out, if I can project out from there, that creates that loving place. And people aren't reacting so defensively to each other, because I don't know if you notice, but when someone's doing a jab, like it's a teenager jabbing at another teenager, then that inner teenager of the other person comes out and jabs right back. So it's not a healthy communication. So the book really takes just that visualization and through the letters, because letters are personal. We've all gotten these letters from our friends. We've gotten them, we may have written them to ourselves, but we also get them from other people. And so it becomes a more personal journey. And that's why I chose to write it this way, because I had to really feel how I was going to touch people on that emotional level quick.
Yeah, exactly.
And that seemed like the easiest way for me, since that's how I write just in general. It's how I'm honest with myself as I write myself these letters. And I also look at, if I'm not where I want to be, I write that letter, how would I like to look at things?
Right.
So with like right now at the pandemic, if I feel myself getting caught up in the fear, then I can write that letter. What if I wasn't caught up in the fear? What would that letter look like?
Yeah, and through writing such a letter, you'd be exploring this different perspective and like examining that, and like what you were just saying about like the fear that a lot of people are feeling about the pandemic at the moment. Like it really emphasizes about how much like fear stems from control or lack of control, and how like everyone has like this almost innate need to want to be able to control everything around them. And like, I know from my perspective with the OCD, Like I have contamination-based OCD, and it stems from like feeling like I can't control everything, and like I would just feel constantly everything was a danger to me, and I'd be going around doing like my compulsions to try and negate all this danger, and no matter how many like compulsions I did, it didn't make me feel any better, and yet I felt like I still had to do them because I had like this illusion that it was giving me control. And like with the current pandemic and like all the advice about like washing your hands frequently, that has made my OCD get a bit worse. But interestingly, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, with like everyone sort of like constantly bombarding me with all this information about like the dangers of contamination and everything. So like I do feel that if this pandemic, say, had happened a year ago when I was having like all this like acute brain inflammation and when my OCD was like at its most severe, I would have had a much more closed perspective and like felt a lot more trapped than I do currently, because I have sort of like been able to achieve like this sense of awareness and change my perspective a little bit. And like I'm not sort of like fighting to like try and control absolutely everything now. And yeah, like I do just think that like fear and control, they're very much bound up within each other. And I love what you were saying about your book with like it's self-help, it's also like personal growth, and you've got like the personal aspect of the letters. And I love that combination because like a couple of times I've read some self-help books and it just felt very clinical and like I didn't really sort of like know the author, and it felt kind of like emotionless. So like hearing that you've got like these really personal letters in, I think that's really going to like help ground the readers and like show that it's not just someone saying this can be done, but it actually can be, because you are like the example. And yeah, just combining like sort of like this like almost like a workbook sense, like of the self-help with like personal experience and emotion, it just makes it so much more friendly. So yeah, like did you ever find it daunting writing like this self-help aspects of it, like with like guides and exercises?
Well, for me, I didn't, because the journey for me is personal. The one thing I didn't, I've read self-help books since I was 14, was my first one, in spiritual journey stuff and everything. And for me, I saw the same thing you just said. Sometimes, and I've noticed this, people's fight against self-help books, like if they hate self-help books, it's usually because they read one and it made them feel shame for not being able to be like the person who wrote the book. And I remember feeling that. I remember feeling like I can't do what they're saying. I can't get to that place, because they talk about that place, but they wouldn't talk about the process of getting to the place as much. And so I noticed that in a big way. And that's kind of why I really wanted to take the approach that I took with the book, because it's a personal journey and we're human. We're not going to do this perfectly. We're not going to, being in a place of shame and having something that's supposed to be empowering to you actually make you feel more shame. And that just was like, nope, we're not going there. So I want people to see the realness of themselves. And I do that by showing my realness and and making it clear that I am not perfect either. I have to work at this too. And because that was, I actually once saw Wayne Dyer and he's like this big self-help guy. And at first I didn't like Wayne Dyer, and I couldn't tell you why I didn't like him at first. And it was because I felt that shame in me because of how the book was written. And it didn't mean that's how he was writing, but that was my perspective. That was my lens. That's the lens I was looking through. So I couldn't see his positive message because all I could feel was my shame. But then I saw him live, and he had just been diagnosed with leukemia, I think it was. And he was real. Yeah. There was the little nudges of his realness, of his humanness, of his issues that he was having with family. And all of a sudden I embraced him and could see his work in a very different way, because and at the time I didn't know why, but it was because of that. It was because I put him on a pedestal, which I actually talk about the danger of pedestals in the book, of when we put any people on a pedestal, it's saying that we're not equal to them.
Yeah.
And whether you put yourself on a pedestal over someone else, or someone else is on the pedestals, are just dangerous altogether, because we don't see our humanness in pedestals. No. And you don't see other people's humanness. And you really see it with how the world interprets celebrities right now, because they put them on these pedestals. And then the second they do something that's human, boy, they're going to take them down. And it's like, that's so not right. And I actually stopped reading like all those magazines, because that's all I saw was people trying to pull people up and then take them down. And I just didn't like that. And so I know I went on a tangent, but for me, because I wrote from a personal place, it wasn't hard for me to write at all, because it's a real place. And like we were saying earlier, it wasn't me trying to write in a way to impress other people. This was my journey, the steps I took to get myself from that prison to empowerment. This is the journey I took so that I stopped the pattern of getting myself into toxic relationships. You know, it's the pattern that I stopped so that I didn't get stuck in depression. All of those things, it works the same way, because it is so personal. It shows how to make it personal to every person. You know, and even though it's a book for women, I've had men pick it up and read it, because the letters are to women, but the messages throughout are to anybody who reads it. The only reason I wrote this book to women is so that I could get really personal with our personal issues as women, that, you know, the percentage of men that suffer from are very small. So I wanted to get as personal as I can, because that's how I can help people see that those worth things, you know, through that piece. And it just, the book it felt like it wrote itself once I started, just because it was I think it took me 4 months completely. And that was because I kind of reformatted in it too, and cut a good chunk of it out, because I wanted, one of the things that, like, when I visualized writing a book, I wanted it to be condensed so people didn't get lost. Do you know, there's so many books out there, they get too big and you start losing yourself in it, so you put it down. I wanted that book you could read in a very short period of time, so you could get it, because all it takes, even if you don't do any exercises in this book, it will open up your perspective. And that's all I could ever want from the book, you know, is that people see how their perspectives work for them. And I'm so happy that people are getting that.
Totally.
So with the way you process, how has it helped you? Because you've learned to look at yourself so much. How has that helped you with the pandemic?
So it's definitely like helped me like be able to ground myself more. Because I was like the OCD voice in my head would be like constantly telling me there's so much danger all around. And because I've got like this experience with like severe OCD, when I'm sort of like hearing all like the media about the pandemic and how a lot of things are like particularly at the beginning, there was a lot of like scaremongering about it, and there was a lot of information given out that wasn't like actually factual. And I remember like in that point, like I did feel like I was able to like ground myself like more and sort of like work out which bits of information were true and which bits weren't. So I was able to process things a lot more, whereas before I would have just been panicking completely. So yeah, like it has helped me a lot being able to sort of like look at the pandemic and sort of know that like if I'm sort of like taking all the precautions, because like I've been self-isolating, and like that I am limiting like the danger like as much as possible. But at the same time, it's kind of like, because the OCD is very much about like the therapy that I was having for the OCD was very much about sort of like helping me live with uncertainty and accept that uncertainty is okay, because that was like one of the really big things that I was struggling with, and like the state of like feeling anxious would just be something that I couldn't cope with. Whereas like this pandemic is sort of like giving me a lot of opportunities to sort of demonstrate the exercises that the therapy was teaching me, and it's like a lot of real life situations, and yeah, like it is proving to me that I can actually do this and I can live with uncertainty now. And like a year ago, if you'd asked me if I could live with uncertainty, I'd be like, no way. And like, I'd just be like panicking. So it is teaching me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. And just being able to see that now and like have this perspective on myself, I didn't think I would be able to. It is really, well, it's really empowering, and it just makes me feel like stronger and more confident as well. So yeah, definitely. And yeah, just being able to like write out my feelings, because like I'm still getting like these episodes of like intense OCD where I'm just like absolutely convinced that like everything is like a huge danger. Like even like regardless of a pandemic, I'll just like find something and I'll become so fixated and obsessed by it. But yeah, in those moments I've like learned that, because I did like the therapy writing before, if I just sort of like write out my feelings, and like even if it's not poetry, even if I'm just sort of like fictionalizing it into like a scene in a current manuscript I'm working on, I found it does really help. And writing just, it really is so powerful, just to like help you process, especially like the complexity of feelings, and also like what it means to be human. Because I know that you were saying earlier that you were like really interested in sort of like human reactions and feelings, and just like how personal like everything kind of is when you're looking at it through like your own sort of like narrow lens in a sense. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the only way we can interpret the world is through our own lens. And realizing that to me is empowering in itself. It's realizing I have that control. That's the one control I have, is how I perceive the world. It's how I perceive myself, how I perceive the world. No matter what anybody does to me, that's the one thing I can do. You know, holding ourselves accountable and responsible for our power and what we give away is to me, that was the most empowering feeling, is knowing that I had that, because I like you struggle with that from trauma and stuff. You know, you have abandonment issues, you have things that where you obsess about that control over scheduling and time. Sorry, my dog just knocked down my light. But they you have that, you know, that same thing, and so sorry, I have that same feeling about control when it comes to, like, I used to not be able to do something if it wasn't a plan, if I didn't know the exacts. And then I actually found that I got so obsessed with time that I can't wear a watch, because I will look at that clock and go, okay, I have this many minutes to go here, you know, and it became very obsessive. And so I go, okay, so how can I break myself free from that? You know, and it's like, okay, not carry a watch and set an alarm, because then I know, and then I can be present. Because one of the things that this pandemic has taught me is to be more present, to really practice what I preach when it comes to the importance of presence. Is for the first time, I saw this meme and I loved it. It's like, so all those things that you planned, like your 5-year plan of what was going to happen in 2020 back in 2015, nobody got that one right, you know? And I was laughing, and it's so true. It's like, because you don't know what tomorrow, this is a time where you really can embrace that you do not know what's coming. You know, we don't know what things are going to look like in a year. We don't know how anything's going to be. So all we can really do to really help ourselves is be present now. What can we do right now? What can we do in this moment? What we can, how can we make our lives better right now? How can we make someone else's life better right now? It's not 5 years down the road. So for me, it really has expressed that importance of presence. And you were talking about the tools that you learned from your life have really come out now. And that's what I'm seeing too. It's like all those life tools have been just, it's like, okay, now you get to use them now, right here, right now. And it had that same empowering effect on me as I went through all the different motions. And, I love what you say, because it's about writing down exactly how you're feeling right now. Because it's, if we don't name it, we can't do any, like we were saying, you can't do anything with it if you don't see it. And for me, when I name something, it has less power over me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's like you all of a sudden, like you said, become empowered by it instead of controlled by it. And so even though there's a lot of negative stuff and stuff, I feel very compassionate for other people. And I feel sorry for, the people who have lost their lives and stuff. There also is that perspective that we can look through to embrace and become empowered through it too. And that's where I'm trying to live from, is that empowerment.
And especially when we haven't got sort of like any personal level control over the pandemic. Like we can't do anything about it on like a grand scale.
No.
So it makes sense just to like change our perspectives, if that will like help us more in the current moment. Because like it's going to happen whether we change our perspectives or not. So we may as well change our perspectives so then we can get some sort of like usefulness from it, even if it's just like understanding ourselves more.
Yeah, so. I agree. My dog is like going crazy. Sorry. She's like, I want to get out. But yeah, this is why I love the topic of perspective, because if we were two people who didn't want to look at ourselves and wanted to blame the world, and so we could like have this conversation that would go a completely different way, because of us wanting to put the blame on everybody else instead of just embracing what we have and looking at what we have and what we can do. Freedom is within ourselves. It's not outside of us. It's within ourselves. And so we're making the choice to become free through this, and other people are going to choose differently.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's where you want to go. That's your life. What's that saying? That those are your monkeys, your circus. So if that's the way you choose to live, that's on you. And I like where we are. I like that. And that's the reality I'm going to embrace. And because when I'm here, I do better for other people. I feel like what I say can actually help somebody else by me being in the place where I can look at things from a perspective that doesn't make me feel like I'm a prisoner.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like feeling that way. I lived that way for a very long time, and I didn't like my life that way. So I chose differently.
Exactly. And sort of like this sense of being free or being a prisoner, like they're two totally different like ways to live as well. And I know like when I felt like really trapped by sort of like my illness and like with all the sort of like psychiatric symptoms that I was experiencing, and I was getting like all the hallucinations, and like one of the things that I was really terrified of birds, so I developed this phobia of birds overnight, but it fed into my psychosis. So then I would be seeing all these birds flying around me and I'd be convinced that they were real, and if I went outside and a real bird did fly past, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between that bird and all the ones that I could still see flying around me, because it just felt so real. So I had no way of knowing which was like reality and which was the psychosis. And I remember how like trapped by it I felt, and I just felt like I had no control. But I felt that like the more I felt like I was trapped, the worse the fear of the birds got, and the more it felt like I would never escape this entrapment. So I sort of like started like this exposure therapy to sort of like get me sort of like to a point where I could look at a bird and not be afraid, because I thought if I can actually look at like a real bird that's actually there and not be afraid, then maybe my hallucinations won't have such a hold over me because I won't feel as much fear. So I was trying to like sort of like desensitize myself to like this phobia that I had, and like I'm still working on that now, so like I'm not hallucinating to that extent, but like when I go outside and I live on a farm, so we've got like birds flying around everywhere because like we're in the middle of nowhere. And if I see a bird now, like I used to like hide and I'd get so scared and I'd just be like trying to avoid it. Whereas now, like if a bird flies past me, I just stop and I stand where I am and I just watch it. And I just try to be like really grounding myself and sort of, like being really aware of like all my different senses. And I just like look at the bird, and through looking at it, I can sort of like see it's not scary. And yeah, that process has just been so helpful for me. Because like I was dealing with like the fear of the of having like this psychosis episode, but then it was also causing an extra level of fear, and I just realized I didn't need to have like that extra level of fear, because then I was dealing with two types of fear rather than just one. And yeah, like changing my perspective there helped me so much. And I've come to sort of like almost use the bird as a symbol now for my illness, because yeah, it just sort of like relates to a lot of different aspects of my illness so much, particularly since like the one animal I was hallucinating constantly, and I have no idea why it was a bird, because like I was fine with birds before all of this. So yeah, and like because I've been working on like this second memoir, like going into all in more detail, I am sort of like looking at like birds in more detail. And one of my chapters, I've actually written it from the perspective of a bird. Just sort of like, yeah, because I was just like really fascinated. And like one of the sort of like creative nonfiction writing exercises I've been doing is sort of like examining how different perspectives can change a story. And like, because like in a traditional sense, in like if you've got like a fairy tale, you've got like a villain protagonist, you've usually got like a princess, you've got a prince. And like if you sort of like tell the story from different perspectives, it can almost become a different genre. So I thought, oh well, why not try that just with like my memoir? So yeah, I've got like this chapter like right in the middle that's just like told from the perspective of a bird, and writing it was just so empowering for me, and it really like gave me this sense of freedom. And it was only writing that chapter that made me realize that birds traditionally symbolize freedom with like flying and being able to escape. And up until that point, I thought of birds as like this thing that trapped me, whereas now I'm trying to like look at them as this like symbol of like escape and freedom and getting away and flying and being free. So yeah, I've like really noticed my perspective has changed. Yeah.
Well, I love that, because it's the same thing I do with nature. Like nature has so much to teach us about perspective and just how we view something in nature. I had the same thing with birds. It's like I look, well, not the fear, but I did this exercise that Eckhart Tolle had in one of his books, and it said to look at a bird and not name it. Like just embrace like the bird and what it just, the isness of it and the being of it. And it really helped open my eyes to the way I looked at things in nature. I could be more open with how I saw things. And it helped me so much with my life, because I had this big tree in my yard, and someone was telling me it was a ficus, so it grows the it crawls, like it grows all out if you take care of it the right way. And someone said you have to get the dead weight off the top or else it can't put its energy in the right places. And I'm like, to me, that was so profound and taught me so much and got my mind like, oh my gosh, that's us. You know? And so I love when people find something in nature that they do that with, because it's true. What can once make us feel trapped can break us open in such a beautiful way when we look to nature for those life lessons of, you know, embracing something. And I love how you took it on. I mean, I think that's so powerful in itself of looking at it, and because it's just as easy to run from it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And people choose to do that all the time. They choose to run. They choose not to see. They choose to put their blinders on. But the way it opens you up when you look at it is just, to me, it's everything. It's what gives me the awe for life. You know, I'm like, I can go out in nature and be like, you know, and so excited about everything I see because of it. And so much rather be here.
Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, what advice have you got for people out there who want to turn to writing in order to process like difficult things, or like this feeling of being trapped, and but they want to sort of like explore how like changing their perspective and interpretation of things can free them? Like, what would you say the initial sort of starting points should be if they're turning to writing for this?
I think with me, it was easier to write a letter to a friend.
Right.
Pick my best friend and write. And it's not that you're going to give the letter to your best friend, but write to them because you want them to know you completely and see exactly where you are. So writing in that way, and then being able to look at that letter and then turn it around to, okay, this is what I am writing outward. Well, what is that inward part? And then writing the letter from that perspective. Okay, if I'm feeling this, then there might be some shame here because I'm covering, you know, shame is a secret. Shame is something that where we feel unworthy and unlovable. If we can't tap into that place of seeing that, we can't heal that. So it's that's how we start taking off the layers. And I honestly, I believe that trying to find an outer fix to something is never going to work if you don't do the inward fix first.
Yeah.
You know, I tried it for years and ended up in the hospital. So it didn't work. So when I finally was ready to take that journey inward, and that's what the letters can help people do. And even writing, if you have trouble with toxic relationships, writing what you want in an ideal partner helps us see what we're doing to ourselves, what choices we're making for ourselves. Because healthy attracts healthy, sick attracts sick. So if we're wanting to attract a healthy partner, first we have to see the things we want, but then we have to turn into those things.
Yeah.
So these are things that letters can do. You can write a letter to your best friend about that ideal relationship you want, but then you have to turn around and turn it into, okay, well, how do I need to change to get it? Because whatever we're projecting out, we're getting back. So, you know, and it's just having that awareness that first we have to look at it. And any kind of writing, like we were saying, poetry both helped us personally get to the root of the feeling. And I needed to do that first before I could even understand my feelings. So studying poetry was probably the best thing I did for myself, of just knowing that rhythm and flow of how emotions work in a way that can be beautiful, even if they're dark.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
You know, and we're all going to have darkness, and accepting that you're not going to get rid of all your darkness. You know, we're not going to get rid of that piece. It's a part of us. It's what we learn from. That's how we get our lessons. And that's how we become more empowered. And like you were talking about with any kind of mental health, if we have something happen with our mental health where we get labeled with something, It doesn't have to be a prison. That's a choice to make it a prison. We can choose to be empowered by it, like you've chosen. It's led you down all these different directions. So just understanding that the only prison there ever is in our minds. So we can write ourselves a new story at any time, but we just have to commit to that, and for me, that means writing every day. Like even with now, a spiritual connection is very important to me. So I write a letter to the universe, every day, and pay attention to the things that happen, pay attention to the miracles, pay attention to the cool things I got to see in nature. But that makes me feel connected and stay connected. So, living in gratitude is living in abundance. When we don't feel gratitude, that's and we're always in that wanting, that's living in lack. So it's why writing gratitude lists are important. So whatever you're writing, it's getting out the things that are right there, seeing them, but then going into what you do want and appreciating the moment you're in. Just to be able to see something is wonderful. It's a gift. So
like appreciation is just like really key to it all, and just sort of having this awareness and ability to appreciate everything, like even the like darker emotions as well, because like without them you wouldn't appreciate the opposite end of it, the spectrum and everything. So you can't really sort of like have one without the other. Like I've definitely found that, because like if I hadn't experienced all sort of like that really isolating time of this illness, I wouldn't have this current appreciation for the world now. And so although like it was like this really terrible like time that I lived through, I can see like hope in it as well, with like how it has changed me, because I am a lot more confident now, and I'm more like aware that there are a lot of things I can't control, but also because I've got like this like almost threat of it happening again, because it's a chronic condition where you do get flare-ups. I'm like, well, I can't control that, so I may as well do what I want to do now, rather than thinking, well, I could do it later, but I might not be able to. So it's very much taught me to like live more in the moment now, which is a happier way to live as well anyway, because like it's very freeing.
Yes. Because you never feel trapped if you're in the moment.
Exactly.
That's the thing, that's the beautiful piece of it is we're made exactly the way we're supposed to be made, to have the journey we're supposed to have, and that's individual to each one of us, and each journey is important. And it's not comparing ourselves to other people's journeys doesn't help us. It doesn't.
No, that's so unproductive.
So it's just seeing, okay, this is something I want, but why do I, like really investigating why you want it, because you see it all the time with people with I find it in relationships. People will be like, I want that relationship. But if they got into that relationship, they might not want that relationship, because that relationship wouldn't be right for them, because that relationship might involve two people that do things very differently than you're comfortable doing things. But that was what was right for them. And it's part of the reason that living like this has helped me not judge other people's journeys, because I know it's theirs. I know it's theirs to experience. And, we were talking about, we can live the way we want to, and this is the way we're choosing to live, and we like it. So you can live however you want, and embracing those choices that we do get to make.
Yeah, definitely. We're coming up to the end of the time now, so if we just sort of like wrap up about like key things that we want viewers to take away from this. So like for me, like I just want to like emphasize sort of like the therapeutic power of writing, and how it's just like important to be honest with yourself and to acknowledge what you're feeling. And like, because if you ignore it, like it's only going to get stronger and have more of a hold over you and control you more. and you've got to sort of like change your perspective of it in any way you can that will then allow you to be more productive and allow you a more meaningful and like happier existence as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, when we feel personally empowered, we don't try to disempower somebody else.
Yeah.
We only try to disempower someone else if we're not empowered from within. You know, because healthy people don't intentionally go out and seek out to hurt other people. So, you know, the biggest thing I'd like everybody to see, get from this is it's up to us. It's up to our, you know, it's all on us of our perspectives. You know, doesn't matter what anybody else does, because we're responsible and accountable for our own feelings, our own actions, our own reactions, and it's what we do with them. So embracing that is empowering, and that's how we live empowered lives.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, do you want to just finish by telling people where they can buy your book?
My Letters from a Better Me can be purchased at most major retail outlet or retail online places, both in the UK and in the United States, Amazon.com. If you want to support independent bookstores, there's bookshops.org. It is available in audiobook, audio CD, and paperback. So.
Cool. So yeah, my book Captive, here it is. There we go. Yeah, that is available, well, pretty much all the same places really, like all the major retailers. So thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, because like it's just been really fascinating, sort of like examining sort of perspective and interpretation and how it relates to like pretty much any situation as well, and how we've sort of embraced sort of changing perspectives and changing our interpretation. So, thank you so much.
Yep. And you know, we're never trapped. We're never trapped by that.
Yeah.
Thank you.